So I was linked to a video that showed a debate that was organised by the University of Bristol's Journalism Society. I want to talk about part of that debate, and I really mean I want to talk about a part of that debate. It's only maybe 1% of the debate that I actually want to talk about, and there's a couple of interesting issues that I want to talk about, and that is the subject of gender equality and what we mean by that, and then something that deals with fathers' rights and the status of fatherhood. But part of what I want to talk about in the fatherhood section is so important that I'm not prepared to put it where it would properly fit on this video, which is right at the end. So I'll put it as a sort of addendum, a second little video, so that it sits right on its own, but effectively view that as being tacked on to the rest of this video, and it'll follow maybe a few days after this video has been set public. So what I'll do is I'll show you an opening little clip by this. This is a debate, University of Bristol Journalism Society, as I say, and it's between Milo, Yiannopoulos and Rebecca Reid. I'm not really interested in what Milo wants to say. It's just a little clip of Rebecca Reid, or a couple of clips of Rebecca Reid, that I'm really interested in. Now, the debate was over. This is important. Have we reached an age of gender equality? That was what the debate was around. But before I get properly started, just a little moment of amusement involving timekeeping and the guy that was trying to get the debate started.
Alright, assuming this is 5 minutes and not 5 seconds. But are we all ready? Alright, let's go.
I struggled for quite a long time to understand how anyone could think that we had reached an age of gender equality.
Turns out that was 5 seconds.
Yeah, I thought he handled that pretty well, but it's quite funny, I think, that little bit there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to play you a clip of Rebecca Reid. Bear in mind, Rebecca Reid is a feminist. She's taking a feminist slant on this, and think about what we're talking about. The debate is about, have we reached an age of gender equality? So think about the kinds of things you probably think that she's going to be saying. Okay, let me play you a little clip then of Rebecca Reid.
I'm going to try and illustrate that gender inequality exists, and that it's also screwing over everyone in this room, regardless of their gender. So I kind of tried to think about the 3 biggest issues I think are facing men in the UK today. And the ones that seemed potent to me were men's custody rights, which are pretty archaic, men's mental health, which is really pretty disastrous, and the treatment of male sexual abuse, which I think is really important.
So an interesting approach from Rebecca Reid. You could almost take it as a kind of wrong-footing approach there, because what would you expect her to do? You would expect her to talk about the issues that she feels women face in society, and instead she decided to talk about those issues that she feels men face in society, which is probably the kind of things that you would have expected Milo to talk about in his response. But I wasn't particularly interested in that. What I was interested in is it immediately made me think about what people mean when they talk about society and whether we've reached a point of gender equality, and that perhaps people are sometimes talking about totally different things. You could almost envisage it as kind of a set of scales, and what some people mean when they talk about gender equality would equate to an empty set of scales. There is your set of scales and there is nothing on either side, and as long as there's nothing on either side, then you would say society is gender equal. What other people mean is they don't mean that their scales is empty. There could be quite a number of things on the scales, but what they see is that what's on one side of the scales is balanced out equally by something that's on the other side of the set of scales. So when some people say that society is gender equal, they don't mean that there aren't issues that men face and there aren't issues that women face, but they mean that actually men and women by and large are facing issues in similar proportions now, and that's what they mean by a gender equal society, whereas other people still regard that as in an equal society. The only time that they would regard society as gender equal is if those set of scales are wiped clean, if everything's taken off the scales and there are no issues whatsoever. So I thought that was a really interesting point that maybe goes way beyond this debate, maybe something that we should be minded of whenever people start talking about gender equality and gender inequality and whether or not such inequalities exist. Okay, so she mentioned 3 subjects there. I'm only really interested on the first. It's the first subject, this business of custody of children and fathers' rights and the whole business of fatherhood and how we perceive it. And that's what I want to talk about. So let me play you another clip of Rebecca Reid.
So why do men get such unfair custody rights? Well, I think it's because we live in a patriarchal society that sees men as breadwinners and women as carers. And we kind of deny men the right to be parents because the pay gap provides them with greater earning potential than women, and also because we really struggle to see men as carers and women as earners. So when it comes to divorce negotiations, a father doesn't stand a chance of being awarded custody. And if we close the pay gap and we address shared parental birth leave, and we work to erase the perception of women as homemakers and men as earners, then custody would start being awarded on the basis of who was the better parent, not what gender they are.
Okay, so a really interesting clip there, and several points that I want to make with regards to this. The first, and this is something that Rebecca Reid seems to build her whole edifice on with regard to this, is that in some ways it is the wage gap that leads to the way in which we view fathers as second-class parents, whereas I propose it's the other way round. It's the fact that we view fathers as second-class parents that in the main leads to the wage gap that she's effectively putting the cart before the horse. And to help me make that particular claim, I'm going to play you a bit of footage that I'm going to purloin from a video I made recently called Feminism and More, where I discussed part of the wage gap. But it's a long video. It's a 40-odd minute video, so a lot of you won't have seen that bit of footage. So let me play you that bit of video now. Okay, do you know what would be really useful here? Do you know what I think would be really useful here would be a case study. So here's a case study, 2013 statistics, recent statistics for fucking Scotland. And this concerns the... Do you know I can never do a Scottish accent without swearing. I don't know why that is. This concerns the gender pay gap in Scotland, and we're talking about a pay gap here, not an earnings gap here, so we're not looking at overtime or anything like that. We're looking at median hourly rates of pay and comparing men and women, and what we find for Scotland is that there is a 17% pay gap, a 17% pay gap, that women get 17% less as an hourly rate across the economy in Scotland than men do. Median figure. How does that break down? What would be interesting to know is how does that break down full-time and part-time? Well, here are the figures for Scotland. For full-time, men earn £13.27 on average, women earn £12.26. That is about an 8% gap. But we need a 17% gap, and I think most people's intuition would say, well, looking at those figures, we're going to expect a larger gap with part-time workers if it's only an 8% gap with full-time workers. And if that's what you think, well, if that's what you think, you're actually right, because there is a 10% gap for part-time workers. And here's the figure for part-time workers. And wow, I bet most of you didn't expect to see that. I'll be honest, when I first saw that, I didn't expect to see that. It's a 10% gap, but it's going in the wrong direction. This probably isn't a figure that you will see bandied about very often, but it's mirrored across the UK economy as a whole, not quantitatively but qualitatively, which is that men that work part-time get paid less per hour than women that work part-time. So that certainly doesn't account for the 17% gap. I'm sure most of you can guess what does account for the 17% gap. And it's this statistic here, and I'm afraid this graphic is for the UK as a whole, but the figures are very, very similar for Scotland. I've just got a graphic for the UK as a whole. I'll be honest with you, because I couldn't find a graphic for Scotland, and this one was already made up. But it's the same figures. And the reason this is very, very important is it shows you just how important this business of part-time work is, and the fact that part-time work tends to be in roles that pay less than full-time work. And note how many discussions on the internet and beyond are discussing this figure and this figure, or discussing the wage gap in terms of this figure and this figure. At least that's what they think they're discussing, when what's really the key issue, as you can see in Scotland, and in fact for the United Kingdom as a whole, is this gap here. Okay, so ends the case study. Back on with the video. Okay, so I think that was worth showing again, even if you saw it on the Feminism and More video, because it dispels this idea that Rebecca Reid has. She has this idea that it is the wage gap that is influencing the way we view fatherhood versus motherhood, whereas I suggest it's the other way around. It's the way we view fatherhood versus motherhood that influences the wage gap. After all, with young single people, there really isn't any wage gap whatsoever in the UK economy. But what is happening is, once a little baby appears on the scene, it is the mother, the way we view motherhood is the mother that is more likely to work part-time. And as I showed you in that little clip there, the biggest factor in the UK economy in terms of the wage differential between men and women is the fact that more women than men are choosing to work part-time rather than full-time. I'll discuss this a little bit more in the second part of the video that I'm going to release separately. What I want to go on to talk about, she blames patriarchy for this. And I find this really fascinating that she blames patriarchy for this. For one thing, Rebecca Reid, I want to talk about feminism here and why feminism is a really poor, what I see as a really poor vehicle for dealing with men's issues. There is this idea that some feminists make that feminism is about everybody's issues, right? It's about gender equality. It doesn't matter whether it's a man's issue or a woman's issue. But it seems that there's an inequality inherent at the very heart of it. And I have no problem with that because I would expect feminism to be about women's issues. It's called feminism. That is what I would expect it to be about. That seems perfectly reasonable, right? And we haven't dispensed with the word. We've dispensed with the word chairman and fireman and got gender neutral terms, right? Because we regard gender neutral terms as central. If we want women and men to be attracted to those things in equal number, for them to be gender neutral things, we need gender neutral terms. Nobody's bothered doing that with feminism because the underlying assumption is that it's about women's things. I haven't got a problem with that, but there's two ways in which feminism deals with issues. It deals with issues by a direct approach, finding an issue and tackling it head on. And feminism over the decades has been very, very successful in dealing with issues in that sense. But the other way is to blame patriarchy. Just lay the blame on patriarchy generally and have this approach that, well, once we deal with patriarchy, once patriarchy is dealt with, all these issues will magically disappear. Now, to me, that always kind of smacks of just kicking the issue into the long grass here. If it's an issue we really care about, we'll deal with it directly. But if it isn't, well, we'll give it a sort of token commitment and say, well, once we deal with patriarchy, those issues will be dealt with as well, sometime, never, kind of thing. It's not something that seems to have worked very well thus far, and so what expectation have you? And it also means that you're making a commitment to what patriarchy is over and above what patriarchy actually is. Let me tell you what patriarchy actually is and be in no doubt about this. The term patriarchy makes no commitment as to how things are or why things are as they are. All it says is, this is how things are. All patriarchy means is that the majority of positions of power and authority, whether it be political or economical, are held by men. It doesn't tell you that that's because of sexism or because of structural inequalities or anything like that. It could be because of perfectly natural factors. It could be because men innately are drawn to those positions and women are innately drawn away from those positions. Now, I'm not saying that is or isn't the case. What I'm saying is it doesn't give a fucking stuff about any of that, the term patriarchy. All it says, it's just the brute fact that the majority of positions of power are held by men. So Rebecca Reid's position here is that because of the brute fact that the majority of positions of power are held by men, that for some reason we hold the status of mothers as parents greater than the status of men as fathers. And that's kind of a bit strange, isn't it? Surely you would expect a matriarchy to value motherhood over fatherhood, and you would perhaps expect a patriarchy to kind of big up the status of men as fathers a bit, whereas what's being claimed is it's the exact opposite. What I would suggest to you is if you would expect a patriarchy to, as it clearly does, to value mothers over fathers, and would expect a matriarchy to value mothers over fathers, it's perhaps something else going on other than the fact that we live in a patriarchal society that accounts for the fact that we view motherhood over fatherhood. So it's not really clear that patriarchy has anything to do with it whatsoever here. What I want to do beyond that really is to discuss this whole business of fatherhood, because I would love to see the status of fatherhood changed within our societies. And I think that there is a pressure on fathers to be better before the change takes place, but I think it's the lack of that change taking place that is holding fathers back from committing emotionally to their children as much as mothers do, at least in part. Okay, so I want to discuss that in a separate video. I'll leave this video here. I'll give you a link to the debate if you'd like to watch the whole debate. I will inform you that the sound isn't great all the way through, so it is quite hard going. All right, well, thanks for watching this part of this video, and bye for now.